Today I'm joined by Dr. Bruce Vojak. Bruce is an expert in breakthrough innovation who has led technology and innovation efforts inside some of the world's most established companies. He's the co author of No Excuses Innovation and Serial Innovators, and he now advises mature firms on how to innovate without waiting for a crisis. Earlier in his career, he led leadership roles at Motorola and MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and later served as associate dean at the University of Illinois. Bruce brings both real world experience and deep research to the challenge of building innovation that actually lasts. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn from his expertise. So, Bruce, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me here, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. We really haven't talked about innovation and how leadership and innovation sort of come together and why it's so important. But so I thought when I saw what you were doing, I thought it was kind of good to get you on the show to talk about it since you've been thinking about and talking about and teaching this for some time. So let's get started with just the idea of innovation. So what is the how do we define definite how do we define innovation? What is it and what is it not?
That's truly a great place to start, John. I'd say that let me start with defining it by the negative. It's not simply something new. It's not simply something creative. It's not a technology. A lot of people think it's just a technology, but it's really something that is brought to the marketplace that the marketplace wants and is willing to pay for. So it's some new idea. So the novelty is there, but it's something that people really want in the marketplace. And then I'm going to add too, there's a wrinkle to it that I like to add is that if you can find something that changes the way competition occurs, an innovation can really have a powerful impact, not only on your company, but the industry itself.
Hmm. So can you think of an example of one that sort of changed the industry?
Yeah, I'll give you one that has two examples actually, and that's peeling carrots. You know, if you think
Hmm.
about 100 plus years ago, you and I, if we were peeling carrots, we'd use a knife. And if you're like me, you'd be cutting your fingers, and some cuts would be too shallow or too deep. And then, literally about 100 years ago, somebody came up with this great idea of a safety peeler. And two blades facing each other, you've seen them. They sell them now on Amazon for a few dollars. And that really changed the way carrots were peeled. And that went on that way for probably 70 or 80 years. And then you see the emergence of the ergonomic peeler, the OXO peeler, and a handle that would allow you to be more comfortably peel carrots, change the way competition occurred. Now, those safety peelers were, let's say, less desirable. It would probably drive the cost down of those or the price in the marketplace. And then right on the heels of that was the pre-peeled carrot bag.
Hmm.
And that to me, again, it's a way that competition has changed and it really changes the way the industry operates. And all of those are still there in the industry, but some are much more profitable than others as innovation takes place.
Well, I think that, the example that you provide is one that sort of illustrates the importance of that innovation is not just for new companies, right? So it is,
Right.
in the work that you do, you say that, innovation is for everyone, right? And especially for mature companies. And peeling a carrot, how mature is that, right? As far as
Yeah.
an industry, yet you can see over time these step innovations. So just kind of get us to help us understand this. Why should companies invest in innovation? Why is innovation critical to the lifeblood of a company?
For any company, if you really want to survive over time and thrive while you're doing it, you really have to be asking these questions. Um, I'm going to be really quick to add that I'm not at all opposed to Lean and Six Sigma implementations. In fact, I support that. But you really need to have some kind of these two operating in tension, the optimization of your current business and then a movement towards something that might renew the business. And survival, let's say one of your competitors comes up with a new idea or somebody from totally outside of the industry comes up with a new idea that really puts your product at risk. You want to be able to survive that. And then if you do it well yourself, you can thrive. You can gain much more financial advantage that way. So those two things are always in the back of my mind. How does a company survive and thrive over time?
Yeah, I liken it to, when you're talking about Six Sigma and lean manufacturing, I liken, Kaizen, for example, as being small improvements over time, right? And innovations be sort of the step change in that curve, right? You almost need both as a business to be successful. If you're just doing the step increases, you're not going to get to where you want to go. You almost have to have those big innovation steps every once in a while, right?
It's got a spectrum of innovation that can take place. There are some, let's say, optimization of a design. I mentioned the carrot peelers earlier. If you go back and look at the patent literature from 100 years ago, you begin to see how all these different designs for these safety peelers emerged over time. And then they kind of settled on one or two that were pretty useful. But so there are often small changes within, let's say, a design or a paradigm, but the big ones are the ones that really disrupt an industry.
Yeah, those big step improvements. Yeah, yeah. So one of the things interesting, I've done some research in resilience and resilient leadership, and it's something a bit of a passion of mine. But one of the things I noticed in your material, you were saying that having an innovation culture actually helps build resilience. So I wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit. How is innovation and resilience related?
When I look at it, I say that most manufacturing companies, I don't want to necessarily limit it to that, but since that's a large part of your audience, they rely heavily on cost reduction and what I would say are appropriately incremental changes of design and product features, maybe adding new equipment. And and again, there's always this lurking threat that could be out there of something that would come in and change things. And it protects against those competitive threats. And so it allows a company, even if you invest in it, to gain a better understanding of what might happen. You're ahead of the game because you've already thought about these things. I am not someone who advocates for large upfront investments in innovation, but I am someone who looks at innovation as an investment as let's say an insurance policy or possibly a financial option for future growth that you might invest in. And so these are small things that you do to really gain a handle on what the future might look like.
Mm, mm. So what you're saying is that, as you have a culture of innovation, if as innovation becomes part of your normal activities, it helps you when when crises happen, when bad things happen, right? That you're able to sort of, okay, we know how to pivot. We've pivoted before. We've innovated before. So you're able to have that, you have that muscle that you can use and can rely on to make the shifts and changes. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. It's to be ready, and you can be active and take the lead in it, or you can at least be ready to see what's coming in the horizon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I think about during the pandemic, many businesses could quickly go online to and keep things going, but businesses like mine, manufacturing, the service industry, restaurants, what have you, they couldn't go online, right? Their effort,
Right.
their jobs were you had to be someplace to make something or to serve someone. And what I did see was some companies innovated more than others and were able to make the adjustments and continue on with their business. They were able to do things, you know, uh, basically continue to run their businesses, but in a different way. And I think the cultures that were more resilient were more likely to thrive during that difficult time. And a pandemic's one of those things that you don't expect, you don't plan for. But if you flex that innovation muscle before, then you have it to rely on, right?
Especially in the pandemic. I mean, the companies that I've worked with at that time, um, everything was leaning out their supply chain.
Mm.
And then look at what happened to the supply chain in that time frame. The cost of some raw materials, the disruption of some the supply. Uh, and yet it was remarkable to see how some companies responded to that. And they were prepared. They, as you said, that innovation muscle. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I love that as an illustration of what I saw. I won't go into the specifics, but one company I worked with, they required certain kinds of microprocessors for their product. And when the pandemic hit, that supply chain was disrupted. And it was their people in purchasing that actually were very creative and very innovative and securing what they needed. The engineering team came in and made some design changes, and they were able to adapt in ways that other companies really didn't, and it put them at an advantage. So you're right.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. So innovation and resilience can be related in the as a way to sort of future proof your company against unknown risks that might be out there. So if you have the ability to innovate, you have a culture of innovation, then you have the ability to make shifts when you need to. So
Yes.
uh, so how do we one of the things I was thinking about is what are some of the capabilities that we have to build or to establish if we have an existing company or if we have a new company to be able to have an innovation culture to succeed in innovation. What do we have to do that?
It's funny. I'm not a big fan of short lists, but I do have my short list, John. And there are three things that I say that companies really need to have, and this is based on just what I've seen, in countless companies over many years. And the first is alignment, actually, internal alignment. You need to have both strategic and tactical alignment. You have to have agreement that, yeah, we are going to invest in this. And tactical alignment is that when an idea comes up, you have to decide whether we're in for this or we're not. And those are two very different questions. Uh, the next one is I'm a big fan of simple processes. I think especially for manufacturing companies, regardless of size, but I think that a simple process is much more readily and easily bought into and implemented. And so you might have a process that would we might call it a stage gate or a phase gate process in innovation, but where you take an idea, you develop it a little bit, small investments, small steps. You don't make a huge investment up front, but it's kind of like playing poker. You make a small bet. If it looks good, okay, I'm gonna bet a little bit more, bet a little bit more until we get to the very end, and then you decide whether you're going to go full in or not. And so a simple process like that is easy enough to instruct the new people, to remind the experts at innovation, and to get the executive team disciplined to make decisions when they need to. It's just really powerful. So number two is again simple processes, and number three is having people that are essentially what I'll call innovation exemplars, or in my earlier work, referred to them as serial innovators. And these are just pretty rare individuals. They exist in all companies that succeed over time, of all sizes, I should say. And when you get into an organization and you don't see people who are able to do this, you begin to realize that the company is potentially threatened. And so these are people who see patterns in the marketplace, they see patterns in the industry, they anticipate things that other people don't see. They're deep thinkers, but not in an academic sense. They're people who just really grasp what's going on in the industry. And it's just been remarkable for me to have had the opportunity to meet people like this. I've worked with people like it. In fact, it's really been my driving career motivation, if you will, the last few decades is, how to understand these people and how to know what role they play, the important role they play. So again, it's internal alignment, it's simple processes, and having these exemplars or serial innovators. If you've got all three, you're pretty likely going to succeed. If you're missing one of them, especially the last one, it's going to be pretty tough.
Interesting alignment. You got me thinking about that. So one of the things interesting, if you have good alignment, say if you've done a really good job communicating your strategic direction, where you're headed, and you've got all your employees on board, is it that innovation can come from maybe not traditional sources, whether they might come from an employee, they might come from someone in management, might come from engineering, but it might come from marketing. So do some of these ideas, if you have the right alignment, is it that where you encourage innovation at all levels, and you have to be sort of open to looking for those the people that have those crazy ideas? Is that
I,
right?
I I think you're spot on. The thing that I'll say though is that, and this isn't to this is to qualify it, not to
Yeah.
contradict it, is that for the bigger innovations, it's a very, and I almost hate to use this word, it's a very holistic process
Hmm.
or holistic activity. And so the people who have the biggest impact in innovation very often have an eye on the market. They have an eye on technology. They have, this is more than two eyes. They've got an eye on manufacturing. They've got an eye on marketing. They've got an eye on the financial implications. They got an eye on what's the internal appetite for these ideas.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen these children books, the Magic Eyes books, where you have just mess of
Yeah.
dots, and
Yeah.
you look at it and it looks like a mess of dots, and all of a sudden, you see this beautiful 3D image. That's kind of a metaphor for what these serial innovators, what happens in their thinking. They see these patterns,
Yeah.
and so I do not want to diminish the person on the production line,
Hmm.
but usually companies structure their organization in ways that those individuals don't have the perspective necessarily that someone else may have. And so I think providing them that perspective, I think, I have one colleague who used to, his manufacturing manager and actually later executive, and he regularly went into the organization, he talked to the people on the line, and in that conversation, in that dialogue, they began to better understand the larger perspective that they were working within. And so the bigger the idea usually is something that comes from having that broader perspective and being able to connect the dots.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely see your point. Yeah, I was just thinking I had the one innovation in my industry that sort of changed everything. I was in the room when it happened, and it came from a marketing guy, and it was a stupid question from a marketing guy. We were analyzing this new material, and we were looking at the properties, and we couldn't believe what this new material could do. And the marketing guy said, "Well, could we try putting it in this one product that we have and see what happens?" And we were like, why? He said, well, if it does what you say you can, it would solve a major problem we have in the industry. And I looked at engineering, and I was like, because I was the manager at the time, I said, can you do it? Can we put this core inside of this product? And he said, well, yeah, let's try it, see what happens. And the results were exactly what sort of this marketing guy thought they would be, who didn't understand the technology. He just said, it might solve a problem that I have in the market. And it did. And that is now the prevailing technology in our industry. About 13 years ago, this happened. But it was a marketing guy saying, can you put this into this product and see what happens? So, like to your point, it's connecting the dots. So he had the bigger picture. He saw something which was different, and he figured out that maybe that might solve a problem, right?
He
Yeah.
wouldn't, if he hadn't been, I'll say, in that room or in dialogue with those people before, he wouldn't have even had those dots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, and I'm envious of you being in the room, by the way, because I love it when these things happen. I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful when these ideas come together, and the fact that you can say, I remember the day, the meeting, and where it came together, and how it changed things. It just shows how impactful those things are. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's and it's a lot of people say innovation is a team sport. I debate that with them, but this is an example where it is. It could have perhaps happened had the engineers been out in the marketplace more. I mean, I can think of different ways it could have occurred,
Yeah. Yeah.
but obviously the way that occurred in your situation was spot on and it worked. And so it's beautiful when I hear these stories.
Yeah, and I think the other side of it was like being a leader that's willing to let people say things like that, and sort of have a chance to say, okay, that's interesting. In other words, creating a culture where ideas do come to the top and they're not just shot down and say, well, you're not engineering, you can't come up with an innovation, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. So one of the things that we established early on that even mature industries can have innovation. How can we do that as a leader? If we're a leader and we're in a mature industry, I'm in a mature industry. I'm in the electrical utility industry, so it doesn't change very fast, and we're a very slow moving industry. But so how do we encourage you know foster innovation in a mature industry?
I think that I think that the best way or a best way from my experience is to have executives mirror or mimic the marketplace in their
Hmm.
decision making. And so,
Okay.
what do I mean by that? A lot of companies will use things like everybody gets 4 hours a week to do something crazy, or we're going to have an innovation competition. And, these aren't necessarily bad things because they're trying to get people to loosen up a bit. But I think that you really want an executive to not be too open to ideas or too closed-minded to ideas. And when are they too open? It's when that openness doesn't really mirror the marketplace, when you're getting people to just come up with things. I'll often tell people that I'm fine with suggestion boxes, if you will, but not if those ideas are uncooked or not let's say pre-baked, but they really haven't been thought through carefully. And so I think that and let me follow on that. I wasn't necessarily thinking of going this way, but let's follow on the idea of a suggestion box. If you're going to have a suggestion box in your organization or some mechanism like that, you really need to inform the people, what does the market look like? What are the
Hmm.
needs? You need to inform them, what are the financial constraints of the market that you're in. So they're not coming up with ideas that are let's say silly, if you will. So you want executives to help people in the organization know what's realistic, and you're helping them and encouraging them to come up with ideas. So not too open and not too strict. I've seen executives and I've heard just horror stories where people come up with just remarkable ideas and it gets shot down. And I
Hmm.
was actually on a call with a colleague not long ago, and he related the story. They were stunned that the idea wasn't pursued, and they weren't really given insight as to why. And so I think that it's a challenge or a burden for the senior executive team to do that, but it's a way to develop your people, and over time, it's going to succeed. Because and I'll add this, even if there is no innovative idea out there for your industry, the act of looking into it is critical because at least you've exhausted those questions.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And interesting to your to your point, we can be innovating all day long, but if it's not helping us address a market problem, then we could be just spinning our wheels and wasting time. But one thing, the story I told you was the marketing guy said this will solve a problem for my customers, which is
Wonderful.
that's when you have something interesting, right? So when an
Yes.
idea will solve a problem in the industry, it doesn't matter if it's mature or not mature, then that's something to explore. That's something to know. So to your point, you need to know the customers. You need to know the challenges. You need to know the challenges in the industry before you can sort of say, is this something we should chase, right? Otherwise,
Right.
we're chasing a lot of rabbits, right? Instead of focusing
Yeah.
on one, one deer, or whatever. We're chasing a lot of small animals instead of one big animal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we could be potentially wasting resources. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you mentioned serial innovators. Who are these people? How do you find them? Are they engineers? Are they futurists? Are they dreamers? Are they introverts? Are they extroverts? I don't know. Just
Wow.
curious to know, how can you find these people in your organization?
Oh man, I should have taken notes by what you just listed because it's a whole set of questions.
Yeah.
I'll say they're not futurists as we normally think of, because
Okay.
futurists, as I think of them, are looking, let's say, 10 years out or 20
Okay.
years out or
Yeah.
even 5 years out. They're people that I'll go back to this metaphor of collecting and connecting the dots. They just see patterns in the industry that others don't see. They're kind of the equivalent of a good weatherman.
Hmm.
They see a little bit further out, or I used to tell people that it's like running away from a bear. You've heard this. You said be faster than the other guy.
Right.
And so they're people that see patterns that other people don't see. They're usually able to see those patterns because they have an inquisitiveness and they're out there looking at it. Um, they dig deep. They're not necessarily people who are free spirits and are just shedding their hangups. In fact, it's just the opposite. They dig deep and they let go of preconceived notions by digging deep, not by uh, playing having foosball tables and beanbag chairs. It's not the stereotypical,
Yeah.
entrepreneurial view. And that's what makes it to me beautiful for mature companies because it doesn't It doesn't mean that you have to hire these other people. You've got good people in your organization, or if you have those people in the organization, they'll dig deep. And they're people who, again, I'm just going to kind of riff on this a bit. Not always, but often early in their lives, they've overcome some kind of hurdle in their life. This is more anecdotal than research driven, but it means they're self-motivated. In fact, I'll quickly add they're self-motivated to solve customer problems. And so, John, earlier when you talked about that marketing person, you know, you don't need to necessarily motivate these people, but you don't want to demotivate them. That's the
Mm.
worst thing you could do. In fact, you demotivate them when you try to micromanage them, or you don't give appropriate credit to the right people. Um, but they're out there, they really just do want to solve the problems. And I had seen these people early in my career, and I'm like, how do these people know what to do? And then, when I started studying them with my colleagues, I'm like, my gosh, it's not just the ones I've seen. These people are in a large number of companies. And I don't want to say they're like Dilbert, but there's a bit of that. They've got the knack.
I got the
And
knack.
and
I know the reference.
yeah, yeah, and I feel a little uncomfortable saying that because I don't want to make it sound like it's overly mysterious. But I'll say that if you've worked with people like this, well, let me give you an example. I gave a talk. This has been probably 20 years ago now. I gave a talk to a group of executives and business owners. And at the end of the talk, this one guy came up to me and he said, we got a guy like that, and his name is Kevin.
Hmm.
And I still, I don't want to say get shivers, but I still am just so moved by that. Steve McShane, the founder and owner of a company called Medtronics, a few years later, after some additional interactions, Steve invited me onto their board. I was on their board for 16 years, and Kevin is exactly what Steve said he was and is. And they're not always the crazy or crazed person, but they're not usually, because they're also really good at moving the organization. They're good at
Interesting.
um, uh, convincing people of the value of what they see, and
Okay.
they're just remarkable. I'm not here to sell books necessarily because I get like $1 a book or $50 a book, but if you buy the Serial Innovator book, there's a story about a guy named Tom Osborne, and I don't think we have time for me to go into it, but he totally changed the way feminine hygiene products worked, and it's a beautiful story. And he was just a marvelous person, and he almost lost his job a couple of times, but he saw things, he dug deep, and it's just a wonderful story. And when you see these people and you know them, you'll say, "Yeah, I've seen that." And if you don't have them, you should be a little worried about your organization.
So as we have a lot of leaders listening on this
Yeah.
in this podcast, so you'd say look out for that. Make sure that you can identify people as you describe them that see patterns that are able to sort of see something and say, "Hey guys, this is something unique and we need to explore it." So, and I think to your point, you said as well is if you don't have someone like that in your organization, then you should be a little bit afraid, even in a especially in a mature industry, because
Yeah.
you could you if you're not innovating, and trying to get better or working to improve, you're destined to go out of business, right? So
Yeah.
so we as leaders have to be looking for those type of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. I asked the question about introverts versus extroverts, and
Right. I'll come
I
back to that. Go
I
ahead.
want to explore that a little bit. I
Yeah.
I have found in 30 years of my career that some of the craziest and best ideas for improvement came from introverts who were sort of quietly listening to different ideas, and then they sort of put everything together. And I think that, and I always encourage leaders, if you have introverts, to make sure that they have a voice or you give them a chance to speak, because sometimes they're thinking while other people are talking, and I always want to hear what that thinking person is thinking about.
No, John, this is so on target. One of the things that we discussed in the Serial Innovator book is that, and it's echoed a bit in a chapter, not the whole book, and No Excuses Innovation, is that the successful serial innovators, at some point in their career, they go through something that I would call, or we've called, crossing the bridge, and they accept
Mm,
responsibility to convince other people. And I don't want to say it's painful for all of them, but it can be kind of painful. I don't know if you've heard the joke that you can tell if an engineer is an extrovert because they're looking at your shoes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so most, and I self-identify. Years ago, I heard someone self-identify, and I like this, as a gregarious introvert.
I
When
love it.
we're done today, I'm going to go down. My wife and I'll have dinner downstairs. It'll be wonderful, and we'll be quiet, and nothing against talking to you, but I get energy from that, and yet it's part of this beautiful mix of characteristics you see in the best people that do this. And I'm going to try to put myself in that category, but because they're looking to solve customer problems, they realize that if they don't take ownership to convince other people in the organization to fund it, to try ideas, even if they do a bootleg project to prove a point and to share that information, if they don't do it, they're not serving their customer.
Right.
And so that motivation to solve customer problems kind of pushes them across this bridge, if you will,
Yeah.
to if you will, lead in a very uh, an atypical leadership role, but a very important one.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I think it's a great explanation you gave. And I think again to the point earlier is that we need to make sure that if we don't have people like that in our organization, we need to find them. And if you don't have somebody like that, make sure you find some because those are going to be your lifeblood for new ideas and innovative ideas. So absolutely love that. This, Bruce, has been fantastic. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
I always tell people that in the end, it's all about the people, and that can be taken a lot of ways. I know that the idea of servant leadership and everything is truly important, but I'll go back to these serial innovators because I think alignment is critical. Don't get me wrong. I think simple processes are critical, but if you don't have these people who are able to come up with the ideas, you will not get innovative ideas. And I don't want to say you want to put them in an environment with, poor or lacking alignment or poor processes, but they can overcome a little bit of problem there. But without the people, it's just not going to happen.
No, I love it. That's such a powerful message. I know listeners who've been listening to me a long time and they've read my books. I always say that leadership is a people business, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
innovation is a people business too.
Oh,
Without those
absolutely.
without those catalysts, those people that are connecting the dots, you're going to go nowhere. So even with all the right alignment and procedures, you need people to sort of the one like my marketing manager who just said,
Yeah,
can we put that in that because that would actually solve my problem, and it's like that's the people that we need to have in our organization. So yeah, love it. I love
absolutely.
it. So, well, this has been fantastic. I love this conversation, and I think it's something we probably should explore more on this podcast. The idea of innovation, how important it is, and how critical it is to our business. But how can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do and the books that you've written?
Yeah, great. You can always look for me on LinkedIn. That's kind of the go-to for most people. My consulting advisory business has a website, Breakthrough Innovation Advisors. Pretty straightforward to find that. The books were both published by Stanford University Press. So you can buy them on either Amazon or through the press itself. And just go for it. I'm going to quickly add if anybody wants to reach out and schedule a time to talk, confidential, whatever time works for them, just to explore things, give me a call. We'll set something up. I'd be delighted to do that.
Fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and put links to all of Bruce's resources in the show notes. So they're all down here in your, if you're listening to on audio or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see all the links down there. And I highly encourage you, if something that Bruce has said really, sparked interest, maybe you're thinking, oh shoot, I don't have a serial entrepreneur or a serial innovator in my company. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you realize that maybe you had an innovator and they're no longer with the company. Maybe you're thinking, well, I'm in a mature industry. How do I find innovation? Bruce is the expert, and so I highly encourage you to follow the show notes. Go down the show notes, look for links. Maybe reach out to him on LinkedIn, ask him a question. He's more than willing to share some ideas with you And again, go out and get these books. The latest one is No Excuses Innovation, but we'll put links to both of the books here. But if you're thinking about innovation and thinking about how innovation affects your company, these are the books you want to read. This is what you want to get up to speed on, because without innovation, we're dead. So it's really important. Doesn't matter if you're new or a mature industry, you got to be focusing on innovation. Bruce, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. I think you've given us a lot to think about.
Thanks to you, John. I can't thank you enough. And I said before we even got on this, I always learn something. I always gain something. And so I've gained from this and I appreciate it.
Same here. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is Jon Rennie saying take care and lead well.